The 9,602nd meeting of the Security Council is called to order. The provisional agenda for this meeting is the situation in the Middle East. The agenda is adopted. In accordance with Rule 37 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite the representatives of the Islamic Republic of Iran, Israel and Syrian Arab Republic to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of item 2 of the agenda. I warmly welcome the Secretary General, His Excellency Antonio Guterres, and give him the floor.
Madam President, Excellencies, the Middle East is on the brink. The people of the region are confronting a real danger of a devastating full-scale conflict. Now is the time to defuse and de-escalate. Now is the time for maximum restraint. This emergency session has been convened upon an urgent request by the Permanent Representative of Israel, who noted in his letter dated 13 April to the President of the Security Council that Iran had launched, and I quote, a direct attack from within its territory of more than 200 UAVs, cruise missiles, and ballistic missiles towards Israel in clear violation of the UN Charter and international law, end quote. Yesterday, the Permanent Representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran also addressed a letter to the President of the Security Council stating that, and I quote, in the late hours of 13 April 2024, the Islamic Republic of Iran carried out a series of military strikes on Israeli military objectives, end quote. He stated that the action was taken, and I quote, in the exercise of Iran's inherent right to self-defense, as outlined in Article 51 of the Charter of the United Nations, and in response to the Israeli recurring military aggressions, particularly its armed attack on 1 April 2024 against Iranian diplomatic premises, end quote. According to the latest reports, Iran launched hundreds of drones and missiles from its territory towards Israel, with most intercepted. Several missiles reportedly struck within Israeli territory, one of which damaged an Israeli military facility in the south of the country, and overall, a few civilians were injured. Madam President, when the nature of the attack became clear, I stated the following last night, and I quote, I strongly condemn the serious escalation represented by the large-scale attack launched on Israel by the Islamic Republic of Iran this evening, and I call for an immediate cessation of these hostilities, end quote. I remind all member states that the Charter of the United Nations prohibits the use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state, or in any other manner inconsistent with the purposes of the United Nations. Furthermore, the principle of inviolability of diplomatic and consular premises and personnel must be respected in all cases, in accordance with international law, as I stated when condemning the 1 April attack on the Iranian consulate in Damascus. Madam President, it's time to step back from the brink. It's vital to avoid any action that could lead to major military confrontations on multiple fronts in the Middle East. Civilians are already bearing the brunt and paying the highest price. And we have a shared responsibility to actively engage all parties concerned to prevent further escalation. As the Friendly Relations Declaration of 1970 states, acts of reprisal involving the use of force are barred under international law. We have a shared responsibility to secure an immediate humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza, the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages, and the unimpeded delivery of humanitarian aid. We have a shared responsibility to stop violence in the occupied West Bank, de-escalate the situation along the Blue Line, and re-establish safe navigation in the Red Sea. We have a shared responsibility to work for peace. Regional and indeed global peace and security are being undermined by the hour. Neither the region nor the world can afford more war. Thank you.
I thank the Secretary-General for his briefing. I now give the floor to those council members who wish to make statements. I pass the floor to Guyana.
Thank you, Madam President. I thank Secretary-General Guterres for his briefing and acknowledge the participation of the permanent representatives of Iran, Syria, and Israel in today's meeting. Guyana is alarmed over the recent escalation of tensions between Israel and Iran, especially in a region that is already experiencing intense conflicts. We urge the parties to exercise maximum restraint, to desist from launching further retaliatory attacks, and to seek the path of peace. Any further attacks will have devastating region-wide consequences, and also for the wider international community. The world cannot afford another war, and the Middle East certainly cannot afford another war. The attack on Iran's diplomatic facility in Damascus earlier this month and Iran's attacks on Israel yesterday have only served to heighten tensions in the region. We urge the parties to abide strictly with their charter obligations and to avoid a larger conflagration. As with any conflict, it is always innocent civilians who bear the brunt, with women and children suffering disproportionately. We are seeing, for example, how civilians in the occupied Palestinian territory and other parts of the region are already reeling from unprecedented levels of suffering as a result of the ongoing conflict between Israel and Palestine. Madam President, Guyana further calls on countries of the region to fully comply with their international obligations and to uphold the principles of respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity. We also demand full adherence to international law, including the United Nations Charter, and for the parties to settle their differences through peaceful and lawful means. Madam President, violence begets violence and compromises peace and security. Guyana reiterates its call on all parties to choose the path of peace and dialogue. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Guyana and pass the floor to Sierra Leone.
Madam President, I thank you for convening this meeting. I also thank UN Secretary General, His Excellency Antonio Guterres, for his important briefing on the latest gravely concerning development in the Middle East. Sierra Leone refers to an identical letter of 13th April 2024 from the permanent representative of Israel to the United Nations, addressed to the President of the Security Council, confirming a request, and I quote, to convene a meeting of the Security Council immediately, end of quote. And a letter dated 13th April 2024 from the permanent representative of Iran to the United Nations, to the President of the Security Council and the Secretary General. Document S/2024/304, the identical letter of 13th April 2024 from the permanent representative of Israel informs that, and I quote, Iran launched a direct attack from within its territory of more than 200 UAVs, cruise missiles, and ballistic missiles towards Israel in clear violation of the UN Charter and international law, end of quote. On the other hand, document S/2024/305, the letter dated 13th April 2024 from the permanent representative of Iran informs that, and I quote, in the late hours of 13th April 2024, the Islamic Republic of Iran carried out a series of military strikes on Israeli military objectives, end of quote. In addition to his briefing to the Security Council just now, we take note of the timely statement by the Secretary General regarding attacks by the Islamic Republic of Iran targeting Israel, in which he, and I quote, strongly condemns the serious escalation represented by the large-scale attack launched on Israel by the Islamic Republic of Iran, end of quote, and call for an immediate cessation of these hostilities. Madam President, the Middle East region is once again and regrettably at dangerous crossroads. The escalating tension in the Middle East is dangerous and unprecedented, with the potential to destabilize not only the entire region, but impact global peace and security. Less than 2 weeks ago, in this Council, Sierra Leone strongly condemned the use of force in violation of the UN Charter, relevant international law, including the development and conduct of friendly relations, diplomatic and consular protections, as well as conduct in the region that may lead to an escalation or exacerbate tensions in the already volatile situation. In a similar way, Sierra Leone strongly condemns claimed reprisal attacks not in conformity with international law and the UN Charter. With the Middle East at a knife's edge and at the precipice of a dangerous escalation, either by an intentional calculus or accidental one, with equally grave global ramification, the path to peace is certainly not tit-for-tat military attacks, but rather de-escalation and diplomatic engagement. To this end, we call on both parties and all other involved parties to exercise maximum restraint and resist the urge to the further resort to the use of force. We call on the parties and all other involved parties to be mindful of their obligations under international law, the UN Charter, and to comply with all relevant Security Council resolutions. The parties are unequivocally obligated to comply with their international law obligations, the UN Charter principles and provisions in good faith, in particular, the imperative for the peaceful resolution of dispute and the respect for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of each state. In urging de-escalation, Sierra Leone is also mindful of the ongoing hostilities in the Gaza Strip and the further imperative for the full implementation of Security Council resolutions 2712, 2720, and 2728. The United Nations must not retreat from its important purpose and role in confronting the consequential challenges of our times. The Security Council must continue to play its part as envisaged by the UN Charter. Further, Sierra Leone expresses full support for the United Nations Secretary General and its envoys and representatives to use the good offices of our organization to lead effort in ensuring de-escalation. All involved parties must move onto the path of peace, peaceful coexistence, and good neighborliness through negotiations. States with influence over the parties are called upon to leverage such influence for de-escalation and peace. Let us choose peace, security, and stability over war. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Sierra Leone and pass the floor to Slovenia.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I want to thank Secretary General for joining us and for sharing with us his assessment of the situation. I also want to welcome the presence of the representatives of Israel, of Iran, and Syria at the meeting. I would like to start by expressing our deepest concern over the recent developments in the Middle East. We strongly condemn the large-scale attack on Israel launched by the Islamic Republic of Iran yesterday. We resolutely deplore the serious escalation, as we have done in the case of the attack on the Iranian consulate last week. The sequence of these events threatens to accelerate the spiral of violence, escalating into a broader conflict of unpredictable scope. It is crucial for all involved parties to recognize the severity of the situation and immediately cease hostilities. We call on all countries to respect and act in accordance with international law. We once again underline that the same standards apply to all member states, and all of us have the obligation to uphold the UN Charter. First, let me underline our concern over the regional escalation and its spillover effects. We share the concerns of the Secretary General that the danger of a devastating region-wide escalation is present. It is imperative that every action taken by the involved parties be measured and deliberate to avoid further escalation, since any miscalculation can lead us to the point of no return. The situation is highly alarming, deeply worrying, and it's extremely volatile. Second, Slovenia has consistently called for de-escalation and restraint. Today we repeat our call to all actors in the region to show maximum restraint. We call on countries with influence, on state and non-state actors, to exert that influence and prevent the worst from happening. We urge everyone to choose the path of dialogue and diplomacy and refrain from further retaliations. We therefore welcome today's meeting as a step towards de-escalation and a peaceful settlement of the dispute. Thirdly, we have been witnessing the significant impact of the devastating situation in Gaza on the region, including along the Blue Line, in the Red Sea, and elsewhere. It is our collective responsibility to take immediate action. By adopting Resolution 2728, we took a step forward in addressing the crisis. However, our failure to ensure its full implementation represents a critical setback. Slovenia continues to believe that a ceasefire in Gaza would have a calming effect on tensions in the region. Every moment we delay, the risk of a broader conflict increases. Madam President, in these chaotic times, another major military confrontation in the Middle East could lead to devastating consequences for the region and the world. Placing the interests of the people in the region and international peace and security first, Slovenia calls for restraint by all actors and return to diplomacy. As a Security Council member, we are ready to fully engage in a comprehensive response to the crisis in the region. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Slovenia and pass the floor to the United States.
Thank you, Madam President, for bringing us here today, and thank you, Secretary General Guterres, for your briefing. The United States condemns, in the strongest terms, the unprecedented attack on the State of Israel by the Islamic Republic of Iran and its militant proxies and partners. Iran's intent was to cause significant damage and death in Israel. It launched over 300 munitions, including more than 100 ballistic missiles and land attack cruise missiles at Israel, as well as explosive unmanned aerial vehicles. Iran's reckless actions not only posed a threat to populations in Israel, but also to other UN member states in the region, including Jordan and Iraq. The Security Council has an obligation to not let Iran's actions go unanswered. Indeed, for far too long, Iran has flagrantly violated its international legal obligations, notably through the actions of its Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or IRGC. By arming Hezbollah in violation of Security Council Resolution 1701, by arming, facilitating, and enabling Houthi attacks on Saudi Arabia and the UAE, and, more recently, merchant and commercial shipping in the Red Sea in clear violation of Resolution 2216 and in defiance of Resolution 2722. And of course, Iran transferred Shahed one-way attack drones to Russia, the same drones it used in last night's attacks against Israel, at a time when such transfers were in clear violation of Resolution 2231. In recent years, Iran has also repeatedly violated international law by targeting with mines and seizing commercial ships in international waters of the Persian Gulf and surrounding waterways, just as it did on April 12, when it seized a Portuguese-flagged ship near the Strait of Hormuz. Iran continues to detain both the ships and its crew, comprised of citizens from 5 countries, including Russia. Iran was also, in a broad sense, complicit in the October 7 attack on Israel because it has provided significant funding and training for the military wing of Hamas. This Iranian support contributed to the current crisis in Gaza. Colleagues, these and other reckless Iranian actions are not inherently defensive actions against other member states. given the threats Iran's aggressive actions pose for international peace and security, we have a collective responsibility as members of the Security Council to ensure that Iran complies with the Council's resolutions and ceases its violations of the Charter. In the coming days, and in consultation with other member states, the United States will explore additional measures to hold Iran accountable here at the United Nations. More immediately, the Security Council must unequivocally condemn Iran's aggressive actions and call for Iran and its partners and proxies to cease their attacks. The United States also supports Israel's exercise of its inherent right to defend itself in the face of this attack. And as President Biden stated, we will remain in close contact with Israel's leaders. And let me be clear. If Iran or its proxies take actions against the United States or further action against Israel, Iran will be held responsible. We note Secretary General Guterres' statement warning that the region is at risk of plunging into a deeper and wider war on multiple fronts. The United States is not seeking escalation. Our actions have been purely defensive in nature. The best way to prevent such escalation is an unambiguous condemnation from the Council of Iran's unprecedented large-scale attack and an unequivocal call on it and its proxies and partners to refrain from further violence. Our goal is to de-escalate and then get back to the issue at hand, securing an end to the conflict in Gaza by getting a ceasefire in Gaza through a hostage deal, as well as surging humanitarian assistance to Palestinians in need. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of the United States and pass the floor to Ecuador.
Presidenta, empiezo por agradecer la información proporcionada por el secretario general Guterres. Saludo la presencia de los representantes permanentes de Irán, Israel y Siria. Los ataques ejecutados ayer por Irán constituyen una grave amenaza para la paz y la seguridad internacionales y la anhelada estabilidad regional. Mi gobierno ha condenado enérgicamente el ataque a Israel y ha llamado a evitar una escalada del conflicto que podría tener consecuencias imprevisibles, incluyendo una conflagración que puede afectar a toda la humanidad. El Ecuador adhiere el clamor generalizado para reducir las tensiones y evitar amenazas que mantienen a la población civil en condiciones extremas de inseguridad y angustia. Termino con una exhortación a ejercer la máxima contención y a privilegiar los instrumentos diplomáticos y políticos de resolución de conflictos, así como a contemplar de buena fe el apoyo a las Naciones Unidas, instancias regionales, grupos de países o países con miras a detener esta alarmante situación que, como ha expresado el mismo secretario Guterres, podría conducir a confrontaciones militares de gran escala en el Medio Oriente. Muchas gracias.
I thank the representative of Ecuador and pass the floor to Algeria.
شكرا سيد الرئيس. بداية أود أن أشكر الأمين العام للأمم المتحدة السيد أنطونيو غوتيريس على إحاطته الوافية. يجتمع مجلس الأمن في أعقاب التطورات التي شاهدها الشرق الأوسط يوم الأمس والتي تهدد بتصعيد خطير قد تدخل معه المنطقة والعالم مرحلة أخطر تخرج معها الأمور عن السيطرة ويصعب التنبؤ بشكلها ونتائجها، حيث تتابع بلاد الجزائر هذه التطورات باهتمام وقلق بالغين وتحذر عن عواقب وخيمة حال توسع دائرة النزاع في الشرق الأوسط. لذا ندعو جميع الأطراف إلى ضبط النفس وتجنب التصعيد، كما نؤكد على ما جاء في بيان السيد الأمين العام للأمم المتحدة مساء الأمس: إنه لا المنطقة ولا العالم يستطيعان تحمل حرب أخرى. ولقد حذرنا خلال جلسة مجلس الأمن التي ناقشت هجمات قوات الاحتلال الإسرائيلي على مبنى السفارة الإيرانية بدمشق مطلع هذا الشهر من مغبة عدم وضع حد لسلوك الاحتلال وغطرسته بالمنطقة، كما شددنا على أن ذلك العمل الخطير يمكن أن يجر المنطقة بأسرها إلى الصراع. واليوم تتبدى وجاهة رأينا وصدق تحذيرنا. إن الشرق الأوسط يمر بظرف دقيق يحتم على جميع الفاعلين الدوليين أن يغلبوا فيه صوت الحكمة من أجل أن نتجاوز معا هذه الفترة الحرجة نحو بر الأمان، ونشدد على أنه لا يمكن تحقيق السلم والأمن الدوليين من دون إعلاء مبادئ ومقاصد الأمم المتحدة وخضوع الجميع للقانون الدولي. إن سياسة الكيل بمكيالين وتطويع قواعد القانون الدولي وإعطاؤها قراءات متضاربة حسب المصالح والأهواء تهدد بتقويض نظامنا الدولي المبني على سيادة القانون. إننا اليوم في مفترق طرق، فإما التمسك بالقانون الدولي دون تحوير أو مداهنة، أو الانغماس في الفوضى وعدم الاستقرار. سيد الرئيس، إن أزمات الشرق الأوسط مترابطة ترابطاً عضوياً، ولا يمكن النظر في بعضها بمعزل عن البعض الآخر. لذا لا بد من التعاطي مع الأسباب الجذرية لهذه الأزمات، ألا وهو الاحتلال الإسرائيلي. وإن التطورات الأخيرة لا يمكن أن تغطي على القضية المركزية، وهو الاعتداء على الشعب الفلسطيني الأعزل بغزة، كما أنه لا يمكن أبداً أن تتخذ ذريعة أو غطاء لشن هجوم بري على رفح. ونؤكد على أن أي هجوم على رفح مرفوض تماماً، ولا بد من تجنب حدوثه، فتابعاته على أمن واستقرار المنطقة كارثية، حيث نشدد على أن تهدئة الأمور بالشرق الأوسط في المدى القصير تمر وجوباً من خلال وقف فوري لإطلاق النار بغزة، ووضع حد للآلة القتل الهمجي والعقاب الجماعي في حق الشعب الفلسطيني، وأن السلم والأمن المستدامان بالمنطقة على المدى البعيد يتحققان فقط من خلال تمكين الشعب الفلسطيني من ممارسة حقوقه المشروعة وغير القابلة للتصرف، وإنهاء الاحتلال الإسرائيلي لكافة الأراضي العربية. في هذا الصدد على مجلس الأمن أن يطلع بمسؤولياته في صون الأمن والسلم الدوليين والحيلولة دون تدهور الأمور أكثر، من خلال فرض وقف فوري ودائم لإطلاق النار بغزة، ومن ثم العمل بجدية على إقامة الدولة الفلسطينية المستقلة وعاصمتها القدس الشريف، وإنهاء الاحتلال الإسرائيلي لجميع الأراضي العربية. شكرا سيد الرئيس.
I thank the representative of Algeria and pass the floor to Japan.
Thank you, Madam President. I also thank Secretary General for his timely briefing on this urgent matter. We are now witnessing an extremely dangerous situation that could cause catastrophic consequences for the whole region and the world. Japan is deeply concerned about the attack by Iran against Israel using numerous drones and missiles, which put huge population in real danger and could further aggravate the current turmoil in the Middle East. Japan strongly condemns such an escalation. We are seriously concerned that this large military action will increase the already extremely heightened tensions in the Middle East and lead to a wider and more serious regional confrontation with global security and economic ramifications. It is imperative for the Security Council to address this matter as a united body responsible for international peace and security to contain the risk of the region plunging into an abyss. Japan has been strongly urging the parties concerned to calm down and de-escalate the situation and exercise maximum restraints, as the Secretary General just mentioned. Japan reiterates its determination to continue to make all necessary diplomatic efforts in order to prevent a further deterioration. We must end this vicious cycle of violence at the historical critical juncture. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Japan and pass the floor to France.
Je vous remercie, Madame la Présidente. Je remercie le secrétaire général pour son exposé. La France condamne avec la plus grande fermeté l'attaque sans précédent qui a été lancée par l'Iran contre Israël hier et qui menace de déstabiliser la région. Le secrétaire général l'a également condamné. Cette attaque constitue une menace sérieuse et majeure à la paix et à la sécurité internationale et à la stabilité et à la sécurité de la région. En décidant d'une telle action sans précédent, l'Iran franchit un nouveau palier dans ses actions de déstabilisation. et il prend le risque d'une escalade militaire dont il serait le responsable. Nous appelons l'Iran et ses alliés à cesser enfin et sans plus de délai leurs activités déstabilisatrices dans toute la région. La France exprime sa solidarité avec le peuple israélien et rappelle son attachement à la sécurité d'Israël, de nos partenaires et à la stabilité régionale. Elle se félicite que, fort heureusement, Israël ait été en mesure de repousser avec succès cette attaque, permettant d'éviter le pire et d'épargner de nombreux civils. La France travaille à la désescalade avec ses partenaires de la région. Elle appelle à la retenue. Le président de la République, Emmanuel Macron, et le ministre de l'Europe et des Affaires étrangères, Stéphane Séjourné, s'y emploieront. La France est pleinement mobilisée pour trouver une issue aux crises qui traversent le Proche et le Moyen-Orient, pour la désescalade et pour faire respecter les principes qui fondent notre ordre international. Au Liban, nous avons fait des propositions aux deux parties en vue de parvenir par le dialogue à une cessation des hostilités. À Gaza, la France œuvre pour parvenir à la libération immédiate et inconditionnelle des otages et à un cessez-le-feu immédiat et durable. Il est grand temps, 6 mois après les attaques terroristes du 7 octobre et le début de la guerre à Gaza, de poser les bases d'un règlement politique durable de cette crise en traitant les causes profondes du conflit. C'est ce que propose le projet de résolution que nous avons présenté à ce Conseil et nous appelons tous les membres à le soutenir. Nous devons tout faire pour éviter une nouvelle guerre au Proche et au Moyen-Orient. Je vous remercie.
I thank the representative of France. I pass the floor to the United Kingdom.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Secretary-General, for briefing us today. The United Kingdom condemns unequivocally Iran's reckless attack against Israel, which risked thousands of civilian casualties. The scale and nature of Iran's heinous assault, the first direct attack from Iran on Israeli soil, poses grave risks to the security and stability of citizens across the Middle East. The United Kingdom has long been clear that Iran plays an unacceptable role in destabilizing the region, and that it also bears responsibility for the actions of groups it has supported militarily, financially and politically over many years. Through this attack, Iran has once again demonstrated that it is intent on sowing chaos in the region. As we have demonstrated, the United Kingdom will continue to stand up for Israel's security and for that of all our regional partners, including Jordan and Iraq. We welcome the actions of our allies to deter the Iranian threat. No one wants to see further bloodshed. The United Kingdom is also continuing to work urgently alongside the international community to stabilize the situation and prevent further escalation. It is vital that all parties exercise maximum restraint and refrain from any action that may heighten tensions further in the region. We also call on Iran to release the MSC Ares and its crew unconditionally and without delay. Iran's actions do nothing to advance the prospects for peace in Israel and Gaza. As set out in Security Council Resolution 2728, the United Kingdom remains resolved to work with international partners to secure an immediate pause in the fighting in Gaza, to get aid in and hostages out, leading to a sustainable ceasefire without a return to destruction, fighting, and the loss of life. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom and pass the floor to Mozambique.
Thank you, Madam President. We thank Malta's presidency for convening this urgent meeting. We highly value the insights provided by His Excellency Mr. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations on this crisis. Madam President, precisely 2 weeks ago, when discussing the Israel airstrike on the Iranian diplomatic mission in Damascus, we raised serious concern that the incident could escalate regional tensions and could potentially lead to retaliation and heighten the conflict between Israel and Iran. Regrettably, our concerns have materialized. Yesterday, we witnessed a series of military strikes on the Israeli soil carried out by the Islamic Republic of Iran, invoking self-defense under Article 51 of the UN Charter. We express our deep concern on yesterday's Iranian strikes. A tit-for-tat cycle of mutual aggression is not consistent with the logic of peace and peaceful coexistence between states. It leads to more death, suffering, and misery. It will further exacerbate the prevailing tensions in the region and may trigger more conflicts, potentially involving other countries with unthinkable implications. We strongly believe that it is crucial for all parties involved to exercise restraint and approach the situation with prudence and wisdom. Careful consideration of risks and extended consequences is, therefore, essential during this critical moment. Madam President, in light of the current situation, it is imperative that all parties involved, Israel and Iran in particular, strictly abide by the Charter of the United Nations that compels all member states to refrain from the threat of use of force in their international relations. Stability in the Middle East is vital for the security and development of the region and beyond. It is essential that states in the region and their allies pursue policies that promote peace and stability with due regard for a balance of interests. To that end, we Council members, individually and collectively, must actively engage all concerned parties to prevent any miscalculation that could lead to broader conflict in an already volatile region. Such escalation would have devastating consequences for civilians who are already suffering in Syria, Lebanon, in the occupied Palestinian territory, Israel, and the broader Middle East. We appeal that we strive for peace, understanding, and cooperation in the Middle East, acknowledging the legitimate concerns of all involved parties is a crucial step toward fostering stability and harmony in diversity. And let us remind ourselves that the central issue in the Middle East is the materialization of a two-state solution, whereby Israel and Palestine can live together, side by side, in peace and security, as two independent and sovereign states. I thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of Mozambique and pass the floor to the Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Madam President. I thank Secretary General Guterres for his important briefing on the grave situation in the Middle East, including yesterday's attack by Iran against Israel. The Republic of Korea is gravely concerned about the current situation in the Middle East, exemplified by yesterday's attack by Iran against Israel, using numerous drones and missiles. The Republic of Korea condemns these large-scale attacks, which are not in compliance with international law. To make the situation worse, freedom of navigation is now being threatened, not only in the Red Sea, but also at the Strait of Hormuz, which cannot be justified, regardless of any excuse. Since the outbreak of the horrendous terrorist attack by Hamas against Israeli citizens on the 7th of October last year, and subsequent military operation by Israel in Gaza and ensuing humanitarian catastrophe, the international community, including the Republic of Korea, has repeatedly warned against the possibility of increasingly dangerous spillover in the Middle East. Earlier this month, when we witnessed the incidents at the Iranian consulate that resulted in casualties in Damascus, Syria, the Republic of Korea expressed its deep concern that additional violent incidents could escalate into new tragedies in the region. Unfortunately, what we are now seeing this even more dangerous tension surging in the Middle East. Amidst the worst escalation in the Middle East, where the entire region stands at the risk of being engulfed in the flames of war, what is crucial is finding the most effective solution to ease the tension, rather than finger-pointing and debating over who and what triggered the current situation. Thus, the Security Council should gather the wisdom of all its members. We can still step back from the brink. The ongoing escalation of the already dire tension in the region should immediately stop. Any regional escalation should be condemned, and the regional actors should exercise full restraint in order to prevent any additional spillover. Thus, we take note that the permanent representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran expressed in his letter to the Secretary General yesterday the position that Iran does not seek escalation or conflict in the region, and we hope that this affirmation can be realized with actual compliance. The Republic of Korea is monitoring this situation with deep concern and once again calls on all parties to exercise restraints in order to prevent further escalation of the situation. Let me conclude by reiterating again what Secretary General Guterres pointed out yesterday in his statement and today in his briefing. Neither the region nor the world can afford another military confrontation. Immediate de-escalation is, as everybody understands, an urgent collective need at this critical juncture. I thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of the Republic of Korea and pass the floor to Switzerland.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Nous saluons la convocation rapide du Conseil de sécurité et nous remercions le secrétaire général Guterres de son intervention, détaillant les derniers événements et soulignant notre responsabilité commune. La Suisse condamne avec fermeté les attaques coordonnées par l'Iran sur des cibles en Israël dans la nuit de hier à aujourd'hui. Ces attaques s'inscrivent dans une spirale de violence déjà dangereusement enclenchée dans la région, comme nous l'avons aussi vu avec la frappe aérienne contre le consulat de l'Iran à Damas le 1er avril dernier, attaque que la Suisse a également condamnée. Chacune de ces attaques augmente le risque d'une escalade encore plus importante dans la région. Par ailleurs, nous prenons note avec préoccupation de la saisie d'un navire, le MSC Aries, battant pavillon portugais, par les forces armées iraniennes dans le détroit d'Ormuz. Nous avons, à de nombreuses reprises, prévenu contre le risque d'une accélération de la spirale de violence dans la région. Il est impératif que toutes les parties au niveau régional, ainsi que celles qui exercent de l'influence sur celle-ci, fassent preuve de la plus grande retenue afin d'éviter de mettre en danger encore davantage les populations de la région. Nous appelons toutes les parties à un conflit armé à respecter leurs obligations en matière de protection des populations et des infrastructures civiles. Nous réitérons encore une fois notre appel. La spirale de l'escalade doit s'arrêter immédiatement. La région ne doit pas sombrer dans un conflit encore plus vaste et meurtrier, alors que nous sommes face à une situation humanitaire catastrophique à Gaza et que les tensions et échanges de feu à la ligne bleue entre le sud du Liban et Israël sont à un niveau record. Nous appelons d'ailleurs au plein respect et au soutien de la mission de la FINUL ainsi que des autres missions de l'ONU dans la région. La désescalade doit être notre priorité absolue. Cela inclut la mise en œuvre de la résolution 2728. Un cessez-le-feu immédiat à Gaza est urgent, ainsi que la cessation des attaques des groupes armés dans la région. Nous prenons note de la déclaration par les autorités iraniennes indiquant ne pas vouloir poursuivre leur opération. Nous rappelons dans ce contexte que tout recours à l'emploi de la force doit être strictement conforme à la Charte et que le droit international humanitaire doit être respecté par toutes les parties. Dans de telles situations, le dialogue est essentiel. Ce Conseil et tous les États doivent jouer pleinement leur rôle pour faciliter la désescalade. À cette fin, la Suisse est prête à apporter sa contribution. Je vous remercie.
I thank the representative of Switzerland and pass the floor to the Russian Federation.
Госпожа председатель,
Мы внимательно выслушали доклад Генерального секретаря ООН. Отметили и вашу, господин генеральный секретарь, вчерашнюю мгновенную публичную реакцию с осуждением действий Ирана. Жаль, что на контрасте с сегодняшним заседанием вы не вызвались брифинговать Совет 2 апреля, когда по российской инициативе был созван срочный брифинг для обсуждения израильского удара по консульству Ирана в Дамаске. Хотелось бы также большей активности с вашей стороны по доведению до членов Совета информации по другим, не менее турбулентным для всего ближневосточного региона сюжетам, например, по поводу уже ставших регулярными атак Израиля по соседним с ним Сирии и Ливану. Если и дальше не замечать подобных действий, ваши призывы к сдержанности всех сторон, которые мы разделяем, могут оказаться тщетными. Уважаемые коллеги, когда мы с вами собирались в этом зале 2 апреля, чтобы обсудить удар Израиля по консульскому объекту Исламской Республики Иран в Дамаске, мы предупреждали, что необходим сильный, единый сигнал Совета о недопустимости таких действий. Не только в отношении суверенных Ирана или Сирии, и не только на Ближнем Востоке. В любой точке земного шара. Мы призывали коллег по Совету Безопасности четко и недвусмысленно осудить такие безрассудные шаги, чтобы они не повторились. Предупреждали и о том, что в противном случае риски рецидива подобного, как и в целом эскалации в регионе, кратно возрастут. Мы даже предложили проект соответствующего заявления Совета Безопасности ООН для прессы, который был составлен на основе стандартных для таких случаев деполитизированных формулировок. Что же мы услышали тогда от западных делегаций? Что, дескать, для них не все так очевидно, и что надо еще взвесить, поможет ли такой сигнал Совета стабилизации обстановки в регионе. Соединенные Штаты, Великобритания и Франция тогда, по сути, отказались подтвердить, что базовые принципы международного права о неприкосновенности дипломатических и консульских объектов, зафиксированные в соответствующих Венских конвенциях, применяются равноправно и одинаково ко всем государствам. Результат, как говорится, налицо. Вы прекрасно знаете, что нападение на дипломатическое представительство является по международному праву казус белли. И если бы под ударом оказались западные представительства, вы бы, не раздумывая, обрушились с ответными мерами и доказывали бы в этом зале свою правоту. Потому что для вас все, что касается западных представителей и западных граждан, свято и должно быть защищено. А вот когда речь заходит о других государствах, их правах, включая право на самооборону, и их гражданах, это другое, как вы любите говорить. Тут включается ваша излюбленная аргументация про недостаток информации, юридической казуистики и тому подобное. Вот и сегодня в СБ разворачивается такой парад лицемерия и двойных стандартов, за которым как-то даже неудобно наблюдать. Россия неоднократно предупреждала, что нерегулированность многочисленных кризисов на Ближнем Востоке, в первую очередь в зоне палестино-израильского конфликта, которая зачастую подогревается безответственными, односторонними провокационными действиями, будет приводить к росту напряженности в регионе. Мы не раз говорили, что ни одна из стран Ближнего Востока и Северной Африки не должна становиться ареной для региональной и международной конфронтации или же сведения политических счетов. То, что произошло в ночь на 14 апреля, не случилось в вакууме. Шаги Ирана стали ответом позорного бездействия Совета Безопасности ООН, ответной реакцией на вопиющую атаку Израиля по Дамаску, причем далеко не первой. Сирия постоянно подвергается бомбардировкам Израиля. Многие из вас сегодня не нашли в себе смелости прямо указать на то, что нынешняя вспышка эскалации на Ближнем Востоке разворачивается на фоне продолжающейся уже более полугода беспрецедентной по масштабам жертв операции Западного Иерусалима в секторе Газа и на западном берегу реки Иордан. несмотря на недвусмысленные требования резолюции Совета Безопасности ООН 2728. Немедленно прекратить огонь. Подобное замалчивание первопричин нынешнего кризиса считаем неприемлемым, тем более на фоне нагнетаемой нашими американскими и другими коллегами обстановки вокруг Ирана. А невыполнение Израилем требований резолюции Совета Безопасности, о которой я упомянул, это очевидное неуважение к Совету, ко всем вам, сидящим в креслах его членов, и полное пренебрежение решениями Совета Безопасности. А невыполнение решений Совета Безопасности не должно сходить с рук и чревато санкциями в отношении нарушителей. Госпожа председатель, мы все прекрасно помним опасную эскалацию в январе 2020 года, когда регион чуть не оказался на грани конфликта в результате незаконной ликвидации Соединенными Штатами на территории Ирака Касема Сулеймани и ряда официальных иракских лиц. Надлежащие выводы в Вашингтоне так и не сделали. И в результате безответственные действия, подрывающие стабильность, безопасность и суверенитет региональных соседей Ирана, теперь копируют его союзники. Призываем все вовлеченные в инцидент стороны к сдержанности в условиях накаленной до предела обстановки на земле в регионе Ближнего Востока и расширения и очевидных рисков расширения конфликта до региональной конфронтации. Рассчитываем, что региональные государства будут решать все имеющиеся проблемы исключительно политико-дипломатическими средствами. Считаем также важным, чтобы конструктивно настроенные международные игроки этому способствовали. Спираль конфронтации и кровопролития должна быть остановлена. Считаем неотложной задачей всего международного сообщества предпринять все необходимые усилия для деэскалации обстановки. В противном случае регион может оказаться втянутым в порочный круг взаимных атак и насилия. В этой связи отмечаем сигнал Тегерана о нежелании дальнейшей эскалации военных действий с Израилем. Настоятельно призываем Западный Иерусалим последовать его примеру и отказаться от практики провокационных силовых действий, акций на Ближнем Востоке, чреватых крайне опасными рисками и последствиями в масштабах всего региона и без того дестабилизированного в результате обострения палестино-израильского противостояния. Благодарю вас.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation and pass the floor to China.
主席女士，我感谢古特雷斯秘书长的通报，期待接下来听取伊朗、以色列和叙利亚常驻代表的对局势的说明。加沙冲突爆发以来，国际社会不仅对加沙地区的人道灾难无法接受，强烈要求立即停火止战，同时也对冲突延宕、加剧地区紧张局势、带来复杂严重的外溢影响深表担忧。4月1日，伊朗驻叙利亚外交馆舍遭到空袭，造成多名伊方人员伤亡，馆舍严重受损。这一事件严重违反联合国宪章和国际法，既侵犯了叙利亚的主权，也侵犯了伊朗的主权，性质极其恶劣。刚刚，古特雷斯秘书长通报了4月13日发生的升级事件，中方对此深表关切。我们也注意到，伊朗方面表示，有关军事行动系对以色列袭击伊朗驻叙利亚外交馆舍的回应，有关问题至此可视为已解决。中方呼吁有关方面最大程度保持冷静和克制，根据联合国宪章宗旨和国际法解决分歧和争端，避免紧张局势进一步升级。主席女士，这一轮形势升级是加沙冲突外溢的最新表现，再次警示我们，巴勒斯坦问题是中东问题的核心， 事关中东地区和平稳定和长治久安。如果放任加沙战火继续延烧，其负面外溢效应必将进一步扩散，加剧地区动荡。中东地区国家和人民不希望，也承受不起更大规模的冲突和战争。因此，当务之急是切实落实安理会第2728号决议，立即实现加沙停火。根本出路是全面落实两国方案，彻底走出巴以冲突的恶性循环。中方呼吁国际社会，特别是有影响力的国家，为维护地区和平稳定发挥建设性作用。谢谢主席女士。
I thank the representative of China. I will now make a statement in my national capacity. I begin by thanking the Secretary General for his briefing. The Middle East is experiencing one of the bleakest and most volatile periods in modern history, which risks spiraling out of control if all sides do not take a step back. This was a point that Malta stressed on 2nd April following the deplorable attack by Israel on the Iranian diplomatic premises in Damascus on 1st April. We had stressed the need for de-escalation and for maximum restraint to be exercised by all actors in the region. Regrettably, these calls for caution have been disregarded given the recent developments. We emphasize our deep concern about the significant escalation posed by a large-scale attack consisting of drones and various missiles launched by the Islamic Republic of Iran against Israel. We are also concerned with Iran's seizure of the container ship MSC Ares. The vessel, along with its crew, must be immediately and unconditionally released. At a time when our focus should be on diffusing tensions and reducing conflict, including by advocating for an immediate and permanent ceasefire to the war in Gaza, facilitating the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages, and ensuring the delivery of sustained humanitarian aid throughout Gaza, all we are witnessing are steps in the opposite direction. Iran's direct targeting of the State of Israel risks regional catastrophe, with innocent lives bearing the brunt of all hostilities. We stress that international law, including international humanitarian law, must be respected at all times. Once again, we reiterate our call on all parties to exercise maximum restraint, including in their messaging, to de-escalate and pursue peaceful and diplomatic solutions to all disputes. Let us be clear. The region finds itself in turmoil and stands on the precipice of unimaginable hostilities and suffering. As the Secretary-General outlined, and I quote, "Neither the region nor the world can afford another war." I now resume my functions as President of the Council. I now give the floor to the representative of Israel.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, yesterday, the Ayatollah regime, in blatant violation of the UN Charter and international law, attacked the State of Israel and launched 170 UAVs, 120 ballistic missiles, and 30 cruise missiles carrying 60 tons of explosive materials at Israel. This attack was launched from Iranian soil, as well as from Lebanon, Yemen, Syria, and Iraq. Colleagues, from the moment I began my tenure here, in every speech and in countless letters, I rang the warning bell regarding Iran. I called on this Council to take concrete action against the Ayatollah regime. I made it clear that Iran and its hegemonic ambitions of global domination must be stopped before it drives the world to a point of no return, to a regional war that can escalate to a world war. Sadly, no action was taken. And last night, the world witnessed an unprecedented escalation that serves as the clearest proof for what happens when warnings aren't heeded. Israel is not the boy who cried wolf. We have been screaming from the rooftops for years, trying to wake up the international community, but to no avail. If only this council would have internalized my words, it would not have needed the bone-rattling explosions of last night's attack to wake it up. Colleagues, last night, Iran proved again that it cares nothing for Islam or Muslims. The Iranian attack seriously injured Amina al-Khassouni, a 7-year-old Bedouin girl in Israel. But look at this video that shows how Israel intercepts Iranian drones above the Temple Mount and Al-Aqsa Mosque. Here, you can look at it. This is the Al-Aqsa Mosque. To Iran, Israel's annihilation and igniting the region is more important than Islamic holy sites. The Ayatollah regime, in its plot to impose a global Shiite hegemony through its proxies, has even attacked Saudi Arabia, as we all remember, Aramco oil field, the United Arab Emirates, and anyone else they view as an obstacle. I asked the Algerian representative here, how does this make you feel? Is this a price you support, attempting to blow up mosques and murdering Muslims? Yet, while this direct Iranian attack on Israel was the first of its kind, it is just the most recent chapter in a blood-soaked saga that started from the moment the Islamic Revolution reared its head. The Ayatollah regime has a clear plan. Its goal has been and continues to be world domination by exporting its radical Shiite revolution across the globe. I assume you all know it. The Islamic regime of today is no different than the Third Reich, and Ayatollah Khamenei is no different than Adolf Hitler. Hitler's Third Reich was envisioned to be a 1,000-year empire stretching across continents, just as Khamenei envisions his radical Shiite hegemony to stretch across the region and beyond. This is why Iran arms themselves with intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs. Iran and Israel are on the same continent. You are next. The Ayatollah regimes acts like the Nazi regime, and their army includes Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, Hezbollah, the Houthis, the Revolutionary Guard, and other savage jihadists. Instead of shouting, Sieg Heil, these radical Nazi Islamists scream, death to Israel, death to America, death to England. Just like the Nazi regime, the Ayatollah regime sows death and destruction everywhere it touches. For the past years, Ukrainian civilians have been killed from the skies with Iranian weaponry. President Zelensky, in condemnation of Iran's attack last night, said, and I quote, "The sound of Iranian Shahed drones, a tool of terror, is the same in the skies over the Middle East and Europe. This sound must serve as a wake-up call to the free world. Listen to President Zelensky and wake up." Just like the ever-reaching hand of the Wehrmacht, Iran struck Albania with cyber attacks and launches strikes against Kurds in Iraq. We all remember the 2021 attack on the oil tanker Mercer Street, in which British and Romanian crew members were killed. And just yesterday, Iran seized a Portuguese cargo ship. The crew being held right now by Iran includes Indian, Filipino, Pakistani, and Russian nationals. Iran threatens global maritime trade. Iran is not only a terror state, Iran is a pirate state. Colleagues, just this week, the court in Argentina held Iran directly responsible for the 1994 terror attack in Buenos Aires on the Jewish Community Center, which killed 85 people and wounded 300. And just like the Third Reich and their brutal SS officers, the Iranian regime not only spreads evil abroad, but also torments and murders their own citizens. In 2023 alone, the Ayatollah regime executed 834 Iranians. The regime oppresses women while murdering them for not wearing their hijab properly. When the Iranian people peacefully protest this brutality, they are suppressed by live ammunition. Hundreds of protesters were killed and thousands have been arrested. This is a regime that allows its own people to die of thirst in Isfahan, while it funds terror around the world with billions of dollars. What have you done to defend the world from Iran? Seriously, the entire globe is suffering from Iran, including the Iranian people. Please defend them. For years, the world has watched the rise of a Shiite Islamist Reich. Yet, just like during the rise of Nazism, the world has been silent, deafeningly silent. Mr. Secretary General, Iran has been violating Security Council resolutions and the UN Charter for years. They supply Hezbollah with weapons in violation of resolutions 1559 and 1701. They advance weapons proliferation in violation of resolution 2231. They violate resolutions 1540 and 2216. Why have you not used all possible means to condemn Iran and demand compliance? Why have you instead rolled out the red carpet for these genocidal jihadists? Why do you treat them as if they are interested in de-escalation when you know that the opposite is true? Colleagues, Iran's strategy has been crystal clear: arm, fund, and train terror proxies across the globe to carry out Iran's murderous scheme of domination. But today, the mask of Iranian deniability has been removed. No more hiding and no more bluffing. No more shirking of responsibility. Iran has attacked Israel from its own sovereign territory, publicly and proudly. The mask is off. Iran, the #1 global sponsor of terror, has exposed its true face as the destabilizer of the region and the world. And now, right now, is when the world must stop ignoring Iran's crimes and take action. As Iran's mask has fallen, the world's complacency must also fall. The mask comes off, and the gloves must come on. The snooze button is no longer an option. The only option is to condemn Iran and utilize every means necessary to make them pay a heavy price for their horrible crimes. Iran and its axis of supporters must be shown that the civilized world will no longer stand idle. While many countries immediately condemned the attack, those who did not must ask themselves, how do you want history to remember you? Council members, last night's attack was a blatant violation of international law and the UN Charter. It was an act of utter escalation that can drag the entire region and world into war. But can you imagine if the attack was carried out under an Iranian nuclear umbrella? Or if some of Iran's missiles had nuclear warheads? The regime that launched an unprecedented strike on Israel, a fellow member state of the UN, is barreling towards nuclear capabilities. This is a terror state responsible for global destruction, and soon they will have nuclear capabilities. You all know that Iran is systematically violating the JCPOA and has enriched uranium up to 60% purity and even more. Iran's breakout time to produce an arsenal of nuclear weapons is now weeks, mere weeks. No concrete action has been taken, and the IAEA inspectors have been kept in the dark. Iran is on the verge of becoming a nuclear power, It should terrify every member of this council. Take a moment to think what would happen if Ayatollah Khamenei could have launched a nuclear bomb last night. Is this the world we want to live in? So to the JCPOA signatories, I say, initiate the snapback mechanism today. Initiate it. Impose all possible sanctions on Iran before it's too late. We need a world led by Churchills, not Chamberlains. Colleagues, on October 7th, Hamas, with Iranian funding, with Iranian weaponry, with training, carried out the most brutal massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. They slaughtered our children. They burned entire communities. They raped our women. They took families hostage and are abusing 133 hostages. Hezbollah, with its Iranian arms and sponsorship, have fired thousands of rockets into Israel since October 7th, decimating towns. The Houthis, with Iranian weapons and instructions and intelligence, are firing at every merchant vessel that is suspected of having ties to Israel. And then Iran, who directs and pays for all of this violence, carried out an attack of epic proportions on Israel. Colleagues, we are being fired upon from all fronts, from every border. We are surrounded by Iran's terror proxies. The war in Gaza extends far broader than Israel and Hamas. All of the terror groups attacking Israel are tentacles of the same Shiite octopus, the Iranian octopus. So I ask you, and be honest with yourselves, what would you do? What would you do if you were in Israel's shoes? How would you react if your existence was threatened every single day? While the Ayatollah regime thinks, they only think, that Israel is a frog in a boiling water, that we are becoming accustomed to the threats on our survival and won't notice until it's too late, they are wrong. You are wrong. This attack crossed every red line, and Israel reserves the legal right to retaliate. We are not a frog in boiling water. We are a nation of lions. Following such a massive and direct attack on Israel, the entire world, let alone Israel, cannot settle for inaction. We will defend our future. Colleagues, despite the magnitude of the attack, 99% of Iran's UAVs and missiles were intercepted by Israel and our allies. I wish to take this opportunity to thank the United States and our partners for standing with us in defending Israel against the Ayatollah regime's indiscriminate attacks. Yet, the fact that Israel's air defense proved to be superior does not change the brutality of the Iranian attack. Iran can no longer hide behind its proxies. It has now exposed itself as the terror exporting pariah state that it is, and it must, from now on, be treated as such. It's not enough to remove Iran from the UN Commission on the Status of Women. Iran is the world's worst human rights violator, and such a regime cannot hold any UN position. No more red carpet treatment here at the UN. No more appeasement. Today, the Council must take action. Condemn Iran for their terror, trigger the snapback mechanism and reimpose crippling sanctions, designate the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terror organization. Action must be taken now, not for Israel's sake, not for the region's sake, but for the world's sake. Stop Iran today. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of Israel. I pass the floor to the representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Thank you. In the name of God, the compassionate and merciful, Madam President, as we informed in our letter last night in response to the Israeli regime's recurring military aggression, particularly its armed attack on 1st April 2024 against Iranian diplomatic premises, a defiance of Article 2 of the Charter of the United Nations, the armed forces of the Islamic Republic of Iran carried out a series of military strikes on Israeli military objectives with dozens of missiles and drones. Iran's operation was entirely in the exercise of Iran's inherent right to self-defense as outlined in Article 51 of the Charter of the United Nations and recognized by international law. This concluded action was necessary and proportionate. It was precise and only targeted military objectives and carried out carefully to minimize the potential for escalation and prevent civilian harm. Madam President, we thank those members of the Council who condemned the Israeli armed attack against our diplomatic premises in Syria. Regrettably, in this chamber, certain members of the Council, including the US, UK, and France, has chosen once again to turn a blind eye to reality and overlook the root causes contributing to the current situation. In hypocritical behavior, these three countries falsely blamed and accused Iran without considering their own failures to uphold their international commitment to peace and security in the region. They made unsuccessful attempts to use lies, manipulate the narrative, spread disinformation, and engage in a destructive blame game. All the while, they deliberately disregarded Iran's inherent right to respond to the violation of a fundamental principle of international law, the inviolability of diplomatic representative and premises. Moreover, they ignored the underlying root causes of the current situation in the region. For over 6 months now, these countries, especially the United States, have shielded Israel from any responsibility for the Gaza massacre, while they have denied Iran's inherent right to self-defense against the Israeli armed attack on our diplomatic premises. At the same time, they shamefully justified the Israeli massacre and genocide against the defenseless Palestinian people under the pretext of self-defense. They made cynical attempt to justify and cover up the atrocities of the Israeli regime against the people of Palestine by arbitrary and misleading interpretation of self-defense. Madam President, following the Israeli regime cowardly terrorist and armed attack against our diplomatic premises in Damascus, the Syrian Arab Republic, on the 1st of April, we notified the UN Security Council and Secretary General of such international wrongful act, as well as of Iran's inherent right under international law to respond to such terrorist armed attack. Also, in a phone conversation with the UN Secretary General on 2nd April, Iran Foreign Minister discussed the situation and called for taking appropriate action and a strong condemnation from the international community for this horrific crime. We called upon the Security Council to strongly denounce this unjustified criminal and terrorist act, taking decisive and appropriate measures to bring the perpetrators to justice swiftly and prevent the recurrence of such horrible crime against the diplomatic premises of any member state. Regrettably, the Security Council has failed in its duty to maintain international peace and security. Russia proposed a press statement to denounce this atrocious act, which was backed by China, Algeria, and many members, but was blocked by the US, UK, and France. Faced with such circumstances, the Islamic Republic of Iran had no choice but to exercise its inherent right to self-defense under international law. Madam President, the root cause of the current situation are clear to all. From the start of the Israeli war against Palestinian people in Gaza, more than 34,000 civilians 2/3 of them children and women have been killed. All civilian infrastructures have been targeted and destroyed by Israel. Even humanitarian workers have not been immune from the military attacks of this rough regime. The absence of accountability and conscious inaction faced with the Israeli genocide and war crimes against the Palestinian people has only emboldened this regime to continue its violation unchecked. The US and its allies have blocked the Security Council for over 6 months, protecting Israel from accountability for the Gaza massacre. They not only avoid condemning Israel for these atrocities, but also actively try to cover up them. Their sole priority is supporting and defending Israel regardless of the consequences and at all costs. Despite international pressure and UN Security Council resolution calling for a ceasefire, Israel has defied this resolution. Rather, its focus remains on committing more atrocious crimes, showing no regard for international legal obligation. Madam President, this lawless regime has committed many atrocious crimes against our people. This regime blatantly and openly admitted its responsibility for the terrorist and destructive operation committed against Iranian officials, scientists, and civilians, and sabotage against our peaceful nuclear infrastructure in recent years. This Israeli regime even made explicit threats to use nuclear weapons against a sovereign member state of the United Nations. This terrorist regime is responsible for all criminal and terrorist acts committed against Iran and must bear the consequences. The Islamic Republic of Iran has warned time and again about the repercussions of the malicious activities of the regime on regional and international peace and security. Iran has exercised maximum restraint. Now it is time for the occupying regime to bear full responsibility for its consequences. This regime cannot avoid accountability. Madam President, Israel's ongoing destabilized and irresponsible action and atrocities against the nation in the region are a real threat to regional and international peace and security. The Israeli Prime Minister's policy seeks to expand and escalate the conflict in the region to stay in power. The member of the Security Council must not allow such an august body, the Security Council, to be held hostage to the ambitions of such a belligerent regime. It is time for the Security Council to shoulder its responsibility and address the real threat to international peace and security. The Security Council must promptly fulfill its duty under Chapter 7 of the Charter in response to Israeli reckless defiance. It must take urgent and punitive measures to compel this regime to stop its genocide and massacre against the people of Gaza and uphold its obligation, especially fully implement the UN Security Council resolution and legally binding orders of the International Court of Justice. The main and long-standing threat to the peace and security of our region is well known to all, and the attempts to conceal it through disinformation, a smear campaign, or baseless accusation against others are pointless and unfounded. Iran is never seeking to contribute to the spillover of the conflict in the region, nor does it to escalate or spread the tension to the entire region. Contrary to unfounded claims, Iran has no proxy in the region. No individual, group, or country act at the Iran behest. The US and Israeli regime attempt to label the resistance group in the region as the proxies or terrorists. Their sinister aim is only to justify and legalize their malicious and destabilized activities in the region. The resistance group are not proxies or terrorists. They are legitimate and are only fighting against the occupation and aggression of Israel in Gaza and occupied Palestine territories and of the U.S. in the region. International law recognized such legitimate rights against any occupation and aggression. Instead, the U.S. and the UK are fully responsible for all its decades-long aggressions and other crimes and unlawful measures in our region. Furthermore, they are responsible for all crimes of the Israeli regime, as it cannot commit any of such savage crimes in Gaza without the consent, order, and all-out political, financial, and military support of and a collaboration with the United States and the UK. We reject the allegation made by the Israeli regime at this meeting. Such false and unfounded claims don't merit to response. Madam President, as a responsible member of the United Nations, the Islamic Republic of Iran is committed to the purpose and principles enshrined in the Charter of the United Nations, reaffirms once more its commitment to the maintenance of international peace and security. The Islamic Republic of Iran reiterates its consistent position that it does not seek escalation or war in the region, while warning about any further military provocation by the Israeli regime. The Islamic Republic of Iran reaffirms its unwavering determination to defend its people, national security and interest, sovereignty and territorial integrity against any threat or act of aggression, and to respond to any such threat or aggression vigorously and in accordance with international law. The Islamic Republic of Iran will not hesitate to exercise this right when required. Madam President, Excellencies, Iran has no intention of engaging in conflict with the US in the region. We demonstrated our commitment to peace by exercising our restraint about involving the US Army in intercepting Iranian drones and missiles bound for military targets in the occupied Palestinian territories. This underscores our dedication to de-escalating tension and avoiding the expansion of conflict. However, if the US initiate military operation against Iran, its citizen, or its security and interest, Iran will use its inherent right to respond proportionately. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran and pass the floor to the Syrian Arab Republic.
شكرا سيد الرئيس. السيد الرئيس، إن ما شهدته منطقتنا يوم أمس هو نتيجة طبيعية وحتمية لأعمال عدوان متكررة وانتهاكات جسيمة للقانون الدولي وميثاق الأمم المتحدة ارتكبتها سلطات الاحتلال الإسرائيلي على أراضي بلاد سوريا ودول أخرى، مستفيدة في ذلك من الدعم الذي وفرته لها الإدارة الأمريكية داخل هذا المجلس وخارجه. لقد جعل هذا الدعم الأمريكي الأعمى واللامحدود سلطات الاحتلال تتخيل واهمة أنها فوق الأمم المتحدة وفوق القانون الدولي والاتفاقيات والقرارات التي اعتمدتها منظمتنا على مدى عقود، وجعلها تعتقد أن بمقدورها مواصلة جرائمها وتصعيدها للأوضاع في المنطقة دون أي رد أو عقاب. لقد حذرت بلادي الجمهورية العربية السورية مجلس الأمن والأمانة العامة مرارا وتكرارا من خلال رسائلها الرسمية من مخاطر التصعيد وتفجير الأوضاع الذي تسعى إليه سلطات الاحتلال الإسرائيلي للتغطية على إخفاقها في تحقيق أهدافها العسكرية في غزة ولإيجاد المبررات لمواصلة الإبادة الجماعية والأعمال الوحشية التي ترتكبها بحق الشعب الفلسطيني وما رافقها من اعتداءات هستيرية على دول المنطقة. لقد طالبنا أيضا في رسائلنا مرارا وتكرارا مجلس الأمن والأمم المتحدة بالتحرك الفوري وفقا لولايتها، إلا أن الإدارة الأمريكية وعددا من حلفائها عرقلوا أي تحرك لمجلس الأمن ونهوضه بمسؤولياته في حفظ السلم والأمن الدوليين ووضع حد لجرائم إسرائيل ومساءلتها عنها. إن سلوك تلك الدول ليس بجديد، إذ أنها عرقلت على مدى 7 عقود ونصف، لا بل ما يزيد عن 7 عقود ونصف، قيام الأمم المتحدة بمسؤولياتها لإنهاء الاحتلال الإسرائيلي للأراضي العربية المحتلة وإعادة الحقوق العربية المشروعة والراسخة لأصحابها وفقا لقرارات الأمم المتحدة ذات الصلة، وفي مقدمتها القرارات 242 338 497 التي تشكل الركيزة الأساسية وجوهر الحل للصراع العربي الإسرائيلي والسبيل لمعالجة ما ترتب عن الاحتلال الإسرائيلي من أزمات وتحديات في المنطقة. السيد الرئيس، تحمل سوريا سلطات الاحتلال الإسرائيلي والإدارة الأمريكية المسؤولية الكاملة عن الاعتداءات الإسرائيلية وعن أي تصعيد إضافي يهدد السلم والأمن في المنطقة. وتشدد سوريا على أن منطقتنا قد عانت بما فيه الكفاية من انتهاكات الكيان الصهيوني والإدارة الأمريكية وحلفائها للقانون الدولي ولمبادئ ومقاصد الميثاق. لقد آن الأوان لتحرك جاد تراجع فيه تلك الدول سياساتها الهدامة إزاء منطقتنا وشعوبنا، وتبادر بشكل فوري وغير مشروط لتصويب تلك السياسات، بما في ذلك من خلال فرض وقف فوري للعدوان الإسرائيلي على الشعب الفلسطيني وعلى دول المنطقة، وضمان الوصول الكامل والميسر للمساعدات الإنسانية، ووضع حد للتجويع المتعمد الذي يعاني منه أهالي غزة. كذلك إنهاء الوجود العسكري اللا شرعي للقوات الأمريكية على أراضي بلاد سوريا، ووقف نهبها الممنهج للثروات الوطنية ورعايتها للتنظيمات الإرهابية والميليشيات الانفصالية، والرفع الفوري والكامل وغير المشروط للتدابير الانفرادية القسرية التي تمثل إرهابا اقتصاديا وعقابا جماعيا آن للسوريين أن يتحرروا منه. السيد الرئيس، لقد استمعنا لبيانات بعض الوفود الغربية التي عبرت مجددا عن نهجها القائم على النفاق وازدواجية المعايير. لقد اعتاد البعض في هذا المجلس أن يقدم التفسيرات التي يرتئيها لأحكام الميثاق وأن يسخرها لخدمة أهدافه وأطماعه، بما في ذلك المادة 51 التي تكفل حقا أساسيا لجميع دولنا، ألا وهو حق الدفاع المشروع عن النفس. لقد شنت الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية وبريطانيا وفرنسا أعمال عدوان متكررة على بلادي التي تبعد عنها آلاف الأميال، مجتمعة الدول الثلاث تارة وفرادى تارة أخرى، وذلك استنادا لتفسير مشوه للمادة 51 ومزاعم واهية ليست أكثر من أكاذيب لا أساس لها من الصحة. ولم تكتفي بذلك، بل إنها حالت دون مناقشة مجلس الأمن لتلك الاعتداءات والتحرك لإعلاء مبادئ الميثاق التي تحاول تلك الدول الاستعاضة عنها بما تسميه النظام القائم على القواعد Rules Based Order. إن ما قامت به جمهورية إيران الإسلامية يوم أمس هو الممارسة الصحيحة والفعلية لحق الدفاع المشروع عن النفس كما رآه الآباء المؤسسين لمنظمتنا وكما تضمنته المادة 51 من الميثاق. لقد جاء الرد الإيراني كضرورة ملحة فرضها إمعان سلطات الاحتلال الإسرائيلي في جرائمها وأعمالها العدوانية، ومنع الدول الغربية الثلاث دائمة العضوية في مجلس الأمن من التحرك لوقفها أو حتى مجرد إدانتها. لقد تجلى ذلك بوضوح في عرقلة الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية وفرنسا وبريطانيا. إصدار مجلس الأمن لبيان صحفي يدين الاعتداء الإرهابي الإسرائيلي الذي طال القنصلية الإيرانية في العاصمة السورية دمشق في انتهاك سافر لكافة المواثيق والاتفاقيات الدولية التي تكفل حرمة المقرات الدبلوماسية وحصانتها والعاملين فيها. وهذا ليس بغريب على من قام وحلفائه في الناتو بالقصف الهمجي للسفارة الصينية في بلغراد عام 1999. ختاما السيد الرئيس، في 25 نيسان أبريل 1945 انطلقت أعمال مؤتمر سان فرانسيسكو المنشئ لمنظمة الأمم المتحدة، والذي وضع الميثاق ليكون البوصلة لعملنا المشترك، وضمنه في مبادئه الأساسية ما يؤكد على ضرورة احترام السيادة والمساواة بين الدول الأعضاء كبيرها وصغيرها. اليوم وأكثر من أي وقت مضى يتوجب على دولنا التأكيد على هذه المبادئ، لأن في احترامها نجاح الأمم المتحدة في ولايتها، وفي انتهاكها يغيب القانون وتسود شريعة الغاب والحروب وعدم الاستقرار. إن سوريا العضو المؤسس للأمم المتحدة لا تزال تؤمن بهذه المنظمة ومبادئها ومقاصدها، وتتطلع لقيامها بالدور المناط بها في حفظ السلم والأمن الدوليين ومعالجة الأسباب الجذرية للتحديات التي تشهدها منطقتنا، وفي مقدمتها الاحتلال الإسرائيلي الذي يحول دون تحقيق الأمن والاستقرار لدولنا والرفاه لشعوبنا. شكرا سيد الرئيس.
I thank the representative of the Syrian Arab Republic. There are no more names inscribed on the list of speakers. The meeting is adjourned.
Addressing the wrong person to comment on it. You heard that the Tehran said that it is not intending to continue. So now it's the turn of the other side to stop, for which we and not just us called for. But I mean, altogether, if you consider how the issue was discussed, that was a scandalous and flagrant hypocrisy on how these two issues are treated by our Franco-Saxon colleagues.
Do you think there will be a product out of the Security Council? Any kind of a statement, anything people were talking about?
Not that I know at the moment. I heard the statement by the US that they are preparing something. Let's see what they will.
Ambassador Erdogan called for snapback sanctions. Would Russia support that?
It was a joke, okay?
Thanks, Ambassador.
tensions in the region.
Okay. So, do you feel going to be any other attack from Iran to Israel?
I think that it was clear from what was said around the table that nobody would like to see this. There was encouragement by the entire membership for this not to escalate any further.
Okay. Any other meeting going to be for the same subject this one?
We just finished 5 minutes ago, so it's too early for me to tell you that.
Are you thinking about adopting any kind of resolutions or joint?
Well, there was, if you follow the meeting, there was one member that said that they will consider the possibility in the future. We have to wait and see what is presented.
But do you don't think that everything is happening in the Middle East because whatever is going in Gaza?
For us, the most important point and the priorities and the collective priorities, not just Malta's priorities, but the collective priorities of the Council for the Middle East are, first of all, the ceasefire. Secondly, not in order of importance, of course, but the unconditional release of hostages and the delivery of humanitarian aid. Those have to remain their priorities. There should be no further escalations. We should not lose our focus from what the priorities are, and we have to remain focused on those priorities.
Iran said that the attack was according to United Nations Charter. I mean, this is how they explain themselves. Do you believe that? I mean, how do you explain that?
Malta is a peace-loving country, and so we condemn all attacks that happen and any escalation in the region. Really, we understand and we condemn the attacks of the 1st of April also, but we would, because of the very tense situation, the fact that any action and any further escalation could be very detrimental to a lot of civilians, a lot of people, many civilian lives that are at stake here. And we really need to ensure that there is maximum restraint. Whether one has the right or one doesn't have the right is really secondary at this point. Really, at this point, all the parties in the region need to calm down, need to take a step back, need to ensure that there is maximum restraint, and to remain focused on the implementation of Security Council resolutions, which is a permanent ceasefire, durable, a lasting. I can't remember what word it
Malta
was.
doing a great job. Malta doing a great job this month. Thank you for that. But why you cannot stop Israel for keep killing every minute civilian?
You have to understand the Security Council works mostly by consensus. One member state cannot do it on its own. So any further action for the implementation of the resolutions needs to be a concerted action by the Council, not the Presidency. This is not a dictatorship. The Presidency's role is to ensure that when the Council needs to meet in emergency like today to discuss escalations, that we do it, that it is done, that we conduct the work of the business, the work of the Council. We ensure that the program of work is carried out effectively throughout the month, but it's not our role to implement on our own any decisions.
Did this evening's meeting to vote this month on the Palestinians' application for full membership?
It has been stated by one of the members of the Council that they intend to present a resolution. This has not been presented yet. So once it is, then we will know the potential timing of it.
Did your meeting this evening help reduce tensions in any way?
That's what we hope. One of the reasons why the Presidency ensured that we met very early and quickly with just enough time basically for members to prepare is what we allowed. We would have had it even this morning, this meeting. The reasons why we met in emergency sessions because we want to contribute to the maintenance of peace and stability in the region and the de-escalation of heightened tensions.
And what's your assessment of the result now that it's wrapped?
I think that the message around the Council table was very, very clear that there should be no further escalation. Everybody was of the same opinion on this, so the message was very clear. Thank you.
Thank you, President. Thank you very much.